this evening, I would like to present to you Dr. Erin Presant.
Thank you very
You're
much.
welcome.
I know that was a mouthful, so thank you.
Hmm.
Yeah, so I'm gonna go ahead. Oh gosh, I'm gonna share my screen so
Hmm.
you guys can see my
Yes.
slide here. Just because I think sometimes it's easier if you have eyes on something while I'm talking.
Hmm.
So as Joan said, I work with people with neurologic diseases, especially people with Parkinson's disease, but a whole array of different things. And I really believe that, how we live our lives, our different lifestyles, the main things, like exercise and eating really play into how our brain does in the long term. So I always call it the long game when we're talking about um, things that we do for our brain. So today we'll talk a little bit about eating well for your brain, and I'll give you guys some ideas of why that's important and what you can do. So lifestyle medicine, I kind of focus on that. And it is really all about interventions to treat chronic conditions. And in neurology, a lot of them are Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's disease, multiple sclerosis, Huntington's disease. But other neurologic disorders and diseases can benefit from these as well. So, ADHD and migraines and autism and these types of things also have some benefit from lifestyle interventions. So I really think it applies to pretty much anybody, even traumatic brain injury. If you're not keeping your brain healthy, it's not going to recover very well.
Hmm.
So, in neurology, it's hard because a lot of people, when we talk about eating well for our bodies, like if you have diabetes, you go into the doctor's office and they draw blood and they can look at your glucose level, and then you come back after you've changed the way you've eaten and it looks better. But in neurology, we don't always have that great feedback where it's like, oh, now your blood test looks better. It's kind of more has to do with symptoms, right? How you're doing, which is is hard for some people because it doesn't give you such great feedback. But that's why we do this for the long game to treat our brain like something that we need the rest of our lives, which we do. And
Hmm.
it improves our quality of life. And I also think it's really important because it provides a sense of control for people over their lives when they feel like maybe they can't do a lot, and a sense of hope as well, which is really important in our long-term brain health. Because if you lost hope, then it won't, you won't get better no matter what. So really, it's all about this multi-dimensional approach. And again, today we're going to be talking about the diet aspect, but you can see all of these things play into diabetes and obesity and mood disorders and cardiovascular health, as well as brain health and protecting our brain. So in lifestyle medicine, these are the six pillars of lifestyle medicine, and we'll talk about the nutrition pillar today. It's called plant-based nutrition, but I don't like focusing so much on telling people they just have to eat plants, but
Hmm.
how can we incorporate more plants, and what's the evidence for really eating better for our brains? But some people, or might not be as obvious for a lot of people why diet would even matter to your brain, right? Again, if you have diabetes or high blood pressure, we can see the correlation pretty well. But we do know that a diet that is really poor most of the time, so what we call the SAD diet, or the standard American diet, which is high in ultra processed foods, can lead to this increase of inflammation throughout your body. And chronic inflammation, we know, causes just poor health overall. So stress and poor sleep and depression also contribute to this chronic inflammatory state. And sometimes those things are a little harder to control, but what we're putting into our body is a little easier to control. And our brains are really susceptible to this inflammatory damage. So neuroinflammation. Um, So we know that neuroinflammation can trigger the development of amyloid deposits and neurofibrillary tangles, which is what we see in Alzheimer's disease. And we know that recently a study came out showing how you eat in your midlife. And in the study, they define midlife like 45 to 65 or 44 to 65 as being almost predictive for how your brain was going to do later in life. So it is actually important during all stages of life what you're putting into your body. And we know that people with certain neurologic disorders, the gut actually can show increased inflammatory factors too. So this brings us to the gut microbiome, which is all the rage in neurology and pretty much everywhere right now, about how does the gut communicate with the rest of our body, and why is it even important? Well, our gut has about 100 trillion bacteria that are supposed to be there, okay? And about a third is the same among the population, and 2/3 is not the same between two people. So it's unique, right? So it depends on your lifestyle, where you live, your genetics, all kinds of different things, toxic exposures, all maybe your stress levels, how you sleep. So the gut microbiome changes for people with all of those things. But we know that the more diverse and balanced microbiome, the better people are overall in terms of their health. And we know that this gut and the central nervous system, the brain, communicate, which is really important. So there have been some studies showing that the gut is playing a role in how people with Alzheimer's and Parkinson's disease ultimately do. And interestingly, I focus a lot on Parkinson's disease in my practice. So I found this really interesting, but the abnormal proteins that we find in the brain of people with Parkinson's disease are also found in their gut. So, the question is, how did they get there? Did they start in the brain and go to the gut? Did they start in the gut and go to the brain, or are they developing separately, and why? All right. And we do know that an unhealthy gut will make a difference for people with migraines, again, ADHD. There are autism studies looking at the gut-brain axis and how these two things really talk to each other. So psychiatric disorders as well, including like depression and anxiety. Is there, the questions being, are there certain gut microbiomes that are better for those things or not? So we know what happens in the gut doesn't stay in the gut, and that the gut biome has an impact on what's happening in our central nervous system. So now I'll shift a little bit to the question that most people would be asking at this point, which would be, well, then what am I supposed to eat, right? How do I have a good, healthy gut biome? And the majority of the studies have really been done looking at a Mediterranean type of diet or a MIND type of diet. So we'll talk a little bit about that. The MIND diet, I really love this pyramid that the Old Ways Preservation Exchange Trust put out, because at the base of it, the biggest portion of it is eating with others, enjoying meals with others, and being physically active. So having a healthy diet also includes having healthy social interactions and a healthy way of thinking about food and movement in your majority of the food we should be eating would really be fresh, whole fruits, vegetables, whole grains, legumes, nuts, seeds, herbs, spices. And I just want to make the point that, what's on here, or, what looks good maybe to somebody in America or somebody in the Mediterranean. But if you're of a different descent culturally, and you don't like pomegranates and eggplant and whatever's on here, there are fruits and vegetables and whole grains and beans and legumes in every region around the world, right? So make it your own. You don't have to, these are not the only things you can eat, right? So if your culture likes bok choy, then great. If your culture likes black-eyed peas, then eat those, but there are healthy things no matter where you're from in the world. So you don't need to take this as a literal translation of these are the only things you could be eating. Then the next level up would be fish and seafood, where in America we tend to not eat enough of that. Then poultry, eggs, cheese, and yogurt, and meats and sweets. The wine is there, but I'm going to kind of leave off alcohol for right now.
Mm-hmm.
It's a complicated
Mm-hmm.
subject.
Mm-hmm.
And I would just say if you don't drink, don't start drinking. And if you do, then keep it in moderation. The mind diet has been studied specifically for cognitive decline as we get older. And it's very similar to the Mediterranean diet, except that it does note there down at the bottom, like what you should limit. So
Mm-hmm.
butter, pastries and sweets, red meat, whole fat cheese, and fried fast foods. And in fact, there was a study a few years ago that showed if you just take the butter and switch it out for olive oil, even 1 to 2 tablespoons a day, your mortality from all cause mortality would go down. So that means cardiovascular risk and metabolic risk and neurodegenerative disease risk. So limiting your butter is important. And then getting those leafy green vegetables, again, whatever you enjoy, arugula, kale, bok choy,
Mm-hmm.
they're chard. There's a million of them out there, right? Um, and then beans. Beans are really great food for your brain. Lots of fiber, which is important for that gut, feeding those gut bacteria, and also a lot of magnesium.
Mm-hmm.
So, sometimes we hear a lot about ultra processed foods and how much of those we eat in America. And sometimes people don't quite understand exactly what that means. And so I'd like to just give examples so you understand when you're in the
Mm-hmm.
grocery store, what are you looking for? What are you trying to not eat? And what are you trying to eat? In general, you want to go around the outside of the grocery store first, where the freshest foods are. So usually the produce and things, the whole foods are around the outside of the store. And as you start going up and down the aisles, you start getting into the ultra processed foods, the chips, the crackers, the all of those things that are labeled as healthy but are maybe not the best.
Mm-hmm.
So an unprocessed or minimally processed food, those are really the natural edible food parts of plants and animals. So, think of a whole apple, right? Whole almonds, whole seeds. Minimally processed kind of falls into this category too, like nuts are processed to be put into the bag, but their nutritional value is not really changed by doing that. Coffee has been ground up or the whole beans have been roasted, but their nutritional value hasn't been changed. Milk has been pasteurized, but again, the nutritional content of the food has not really been changed. When we start processing foods, that's what happens a lot of times is that the nutritional content gets changed. We have processed culinary ingredients like, for instance, olive oil, right? You don't buy an olive and squeeze the oil out of it. The
Mm-hmm.
oil's already been squeezed out of it, but it's minimally processed. So there's not salt or sugar added to it. Then processed foods and probably a lot of food that Americans and Western cultures eat fall into this category. It's food where there are additives that modify or enhance the flavor, things that change the texture, salt, sugar, fats, and usually 2 to 3 additional ingredients, and they can be eaten without further preparation. So let's think of cheeses, some breads, canned fruits and vegetables, canned fish, those types of things. Now, ultra processed foods will have salt and sugar added to them, but also preservatives and thickeners, emulsifiers, artificial
Mm-hmm.
sweeteners, and they are produced like mass produced and low cost ingredients. So you're not getting the highest quality ingredients, and then they process the ingredients as well, add a bunch of chemicals to them, and actually produce the food that way. There are actually people at these companies that think of your favorite chip brand or cracker brand. There are people at these companies that actually their job is to try to make these foods taste better by adding things to them. So it's really unnatural. We don't add anything to our apple except maybe some
Mm-hmm.
butter or something, but to apple cake that you buy in the deli section, there's all this stuff added to it. So it's
Mm-hmm.
softer and it's sweeter and it's all of these things. And it really plays on our addiction centers in our brains. So what does it matter about ultra processed foods and why is it bad for our brains? All these additions of chemicals, preservatives, and other ingredients can alter that microbiome. And the gut bugs, they don't have any fiber to eat. There's a lot less fiber in these ultra processed foods. So a lot of them die out and the gut microbiome becomes less diverse. Okay. We know that the addition of those sugars, salts, they're worse for your metabolic health, your cardiovascular health, which in turn is worse for your brain health. So no matter what is going on with your brain, again, migraines, ADHD, autism, Parkinson's disease, Alzheimer's disease, MS, Huntington's disease, anything that you talk about, you need a healthy brain from the what you're putting into your body in order to help your brain fight off whatever else is going on. And like I said, these ultra processed foods are made to keep you eating more. So the
Mm-hmm.
addictive property of them. So when you're like get down to the last 5 chips in the bag and you think, oh, I shouldn't be eating these, there's something that kind of overrides that. And you're like, never mind, I'm
Mm-hmm.
just going to eat them, right? They're usually high calorie. They usually don't have any nutrients in them or very few nutrients. And let's say you eat a diet full of ultra processed foods, but you're not overweight. The dangers still exist there for the brain, even if your metabolic health is okay. Again, probably from an inflammatory standpoint, the gut becomes more inflamed, your brain becomes more inflamed.
Mm-hmm.
I always tell people one place to start with your eating is to start with mindful eating. We do a lot of eating when we're doing other things. So watching TV, driving, picking kids up here, doing all kinds of different things. And what we have lost is a lot of this savoring the meal. And that's again why I like that bottom portion of that Mediterranean diet pyramid
Mm-hmm.
is because it's about savoring that meal with family and friends and having those social connections, which are also really good for our brains. Um, Try to sit down with whomever you live with, or if you don't live
Mm-hmm.
with anybody, a FaceTime, a Zoom, or invite people over and have a meal. Make eating an event and not something you do so much because you're bored, as
Mm-hmm.
your anxiety is going up listening to the weather report or the news, and you're chomping down on your sweets or your chips. You are doing this mindlessly and probably in part because you're bored. And I mean, kids do it all the time. My kids do, and try to tell them if you're bored, then go move your body. If
Mm-hmm.
eating, move your
Mm-hmm.
body, and I think that is a good way to something else for us to do besides just put more food in our mouths. So stress eating is not mindful eating again. So if you're anxious watching the news or you're just in a meeting or whatever you're doing, it's not mindful eating. So you're going to eat a lot more than you might otherwise. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Another way to keep yourself from eating that stuff is don't buy it. Well,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes these ultra processed foods and things we eat when we are stressed are cheaper if we take that money and use it for fresher foods or even frozen vegetables or frozen foods without a lot of other things added to them it would be better. You can think of substitutions. So people tend to be a salty snacker or a sweet snacker. And if you're a salty snacker and you like your chips, can you get salted nuts instead or
Mm-hmm.
something else
Mm-hmm.
that, you could have a pickle, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
If you like sweet things, maybe instead of these processed cookies or snacks, have some dark chocolate. You could have a little bit of fruit, a little bit of honey, and those
Mm-hmm.
pretty cheap snacks overall. And you'll eat less of them than you would the processed cookies, which you pay more for in the box. But where should you start? A lot of people are like, I just don't know. It's too much information and
Mm-hmm.
too hard for me. And I definitely get that. So I think one of the things that we are always doing when we're listening to social media or whatever we're listening to is we see how everybody else is doing it and we think, I am not doing any of this right. And then that's hard. That's a hard place for our brains to come from when we
Mm-hmm.
we think, oh, let's make a change. And if you're already down on yourself, it's really hard to start. So
Mm-hmm.
acknowledge what you have done right. Did you eat any vegetables today? Did you eat a fruit? Did you cook at home tonight? Maybe the bad weather out there in New York is forcing people to have a home cooked meal, which is great.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's getting the family to sit down at the table or one other person and just having a meal with them.
Mm-hmm.
Or were you able to get any movement today? Maybe not walking outside in New York today, I don't
Mm-hmm.
know, but a virtual exercise class or any kind of movement.
Mm-hmm.
All of those things are a step in the right direction. Okay, so first acknowledge that before you launch into a really ambitious plan to make changes. And then I think it's also really important to make reasonable changes, right? So we all know January 1st comes around and people make all of these
Mm-hmm.
resolutions. And I think it's 2 weeks in, they call it Quitter's Day because like 80% of people have given up on their resolutions.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, in part that's because we make we like see where we want to be in maybe 2 years or 3 years, and think we can get there in a month. And then when we realize the progress isn't going that fast, it's hard. Our brains are not motivated and they're not seeing the positivity of it. And so we give up. So make little steps.
Mm-hmm.
Try to find some easy recipes, crock pots, Instapots, soups, great for cold weather,
Mm-hmm.
casseroles, frittatas, just roasted vegetables, smoothies, overnight oats, anything you can do to switch one meal up is important. So maybe the goal would be this week, I'm going to incorporate one vegetable into my breakfast. Great. I think that that's a reasonable goal. Or I'm going to have my kids eat less chicken nuggets this week and more whatever
Mm-hmm.
they will eat, right? So it doesn't
Mm-hmm.
have to be complicated. It doesn't have to be Instagram perfect. You don't have to take pictures of everything you make. It just has to look
Mm-hmm.
good to you. These are a lot of the things I hear about changing diets and why people can't seem to do it. Even though we know it's better for our brains in the long term, it's still hard to do in the moment. So if you hate to cook, right? I hate cooking. I don't want to cook. So try to make it more fun, friends, family, or just pick one day of the week where you're like, okay, I'm just gonna food prep. I'm gonna chop all these vegetables today and keep them in my fridge. Or you got, let's see what was on sale at the grocery store, that vegetable
Mm-hmm.
you buy, and you learn to make one thing with it. Again, it doesn't have to be complicated. Cooking for one, or on the other side of that, cooking for multiple people who like different things. This is what happens in my house. I eat one thing, my kids eat different things.
Mm-hmm.
And so I
Mm-hmm.
feel like sometimes I'm making three dinners. My
Mm-hmm.
husband will eat whatever's left over, right? So sometimes I make a bunch of ingredients, like batch prep ingredients, and we turn them into different things for each person. But it's not a lot of extra work for me because,
Mm-hmm.
if I'm chopping carrots, for instance, my kids like them raw. Maybe I'll roast them for
Mm-hmm.
myself. And then it really hasn't been any extra work, right? Freezer prepped meals, if you do have a slow cooker or a crock pot, sometimes just putting things in the baggie and then dumping them into the crock pot can be helpful. And a lot of these meals are easy, pretty easy for a lot of different people. Different grains, like I'm the only one in my family who will eat quinoa. So when I make
Wow.
quinoa myself,
Mm-hmm.
I'll make a big batch of it and then I put it in baggies. I freeze it in 1 cup portions in baggies. And that way,
Mm-hmm.
if my family's eating rice, I'll pull out my quinoa, put it in the microwave, defrost it, and done. So there are ways you can do this for different, if you have different tastes in the house. And the expense, I mean, the expense is real, and definitely I acknowledge that. So it does take a little bit of work sometimes. Eating organic is a question I get, and I think sometimes we throw the baby out with the bathwater on that one. If you can't afford the organic vegetables, you should just still eat the vegetables, right? Make
Mm-hmm.
sure you're washing them, but don't not eat vegetables because they're not organic. Try to eat in season. So, if you're in New York and strawberries aren't in season, then don't, they're probably going to be $8 or $9 for a thing. That's expensive. So don't eat those. Maybe beets are in season or cauliflower. And, based on what you might like, you can eat those. And keep in mind that frozen vegetables are okay. I think
Mm-hmm.
people dismiss that a lot of times.
Mm-hmm.
It's easier to prep and they are nutritious. And that's where this is, fresh
Mm-hmm.
vegetables are going to be um priority, and then frozen vegetables. Canned vegetables are okay, but a lot of times they have added sodium or
Mm-hmm.
other things, and it's probably just make sure that they don't have that stuff. Fresh vegetables, if you prepare them into sauces or freeze them, they might stay longer. Prepare them into soups, and you can freeze them. Fresh fruit is going to be optimal. And if you're eating the skin with the fresh fruit, that's great. That's a lot of
Mm-hmm.
fiber for those gut bugs, and they're going to be really happy. Um,
Mm-hmm.
frozen
Mm-hmm.
Frozen fruit is great. So again, if those strawberries aren't in season where you are, or the blueberries, those antioxidant fruits, sometimes you can get them frozen, and that's just as good.
Mm-hmm.
Fruit in jars and cans, again, they're oftentimes in really sugary syrup, and that's not great for us. You could consider pureeing them and using them at a later date, stuffing them in smoothies or turning them into a topping for yogurt or something. Also, dried fruits are good, but just watch for the added sugar and preservatives
Mm-hmm.
in those as well. And then fresh herbs, a lot of times we forget how good fresh herbs can make food taste and make it look. So we often eat with our eyes. And so if our food looks
Mm-hmm.
good, then we might enjoy it more. You can actually freeze the fresh herbs and use them for later
Mm-hmm.
too. Making it easier as much as you can do to make it easy, even if you love cooking. Like I love cooking, but I'll tell you, like during the week, things get crazy. And if I don't have those vegetables prepped in the fridge, I catch myself eating things that I'm like, what am I doing? Or,
Mm-hmm.
kids, the kids don't have the food that I would prefer for them to be eating. So if you're sitting and watching TV, a movie, you could chop while you sit.
Mm-hmm.
You can't stand for that long. Or if you have a disability, like one arm or one leg, it doesn't work as well. There are lots of different things that you can use in the kitchen, like a chopper. It has like a bucket, and you can push down a lever. or you can get somebody else to do the chopping, a
Hmm.
processor or a blender. I'm always thinking about ways dinner can be turned into breakfast or lunch. So again, if I make roasted broccoli for dinner, oh, maybe I'll throw that into eggs in the morning for
Hmm.
breakfast, and you can throw roasted broccoli on a salad for lunch.
Hmm.
Makes it more interesting. And like I said about the grains and the proteins, if you're
Hmm.
making these things, you can make batches of them, lentils or black-eyed peas, beans, brown rice, quinoa, all of these things you can make bigger batches and use them for different meals throughout the week. All right, people ask me, do I need to eat only plants? Is that the only way my brain's going to be healthy? And I would say no. It's more about making these slow changes, and not thinking about what you're not eating, but thinking about adding um, more vegetables, for instance. And you'll see that if you're adding more vegetables, adding more fresh fruit to your plate, slowly those other things that you don't want to be eating will drop off, and you will not have
Hmm.
even been thinking, oh, I can't have this or I can't have that. So again, it's very slow baby steps. And so it's January right now, or almost February. If you make
Hmm.
one change a week, think of how many changes you will have made to your diet by the end of the year. That's a lot, right? So you don't need to make them all at once. And in fact, that's not the way you make it sustainable for your lifestyle. And if you really are, if you really do have a neurologic disability, it's going to make it difficult to do all of this at once too. So you have to take care of yourself and know that you're making these small changes for your brain, and it's in the long game. Can you still eat treats? Yes. As you get more into changing your diet, you can learn how to make your own treats, with some substitutions, or again, maybe it's just that dark chocolate with a piece of fruit, and that's enough sweetness for you.
Hmm.
But everything in moderation. If you're going to a birthday party, if it's a holiday, um, I tell people, don't restrict your eating, because then you feel like you're missing out, and your brain won't like that. Your brain will be like, that's
Hmm.
not fair, and then we go and eat too much of something. So I really think that, small changes are the way to do it. Recognize
Hmm.
each little small change and know that it's never too little or too late. So, if you're 80 and you want to make a change, that's amazing. If you're 20 and you want to make a change, that's amazing. If you're somewhere in between there and you want to make changes, that's amazing too. And if you have kids or young adults around you and you're making changes, they'll see that too and will follow that along. And that is how we ultimately change how we all start eating. It's an eating pattern that people see and people continue on um, as we get older. So, all of these things will be helpful for brain health now, quality of life now, but also keeping the brain healthy despite whatever else is going on, and feeling better along the way. All right. I think that was all I had.
Oh, great. I made some notes.
Okay.
Let's see, I'm going to go in the notes. Thank you. That was so enlightening. And I really love how at one point you made a comment of informing people. You are not telling them that you have to eat plant-based, but you are encouraging them. I really like how you incorporate that. That was great. Chronic inflammation is very harmful to our bodies, and that is so true. And I really like how you explained it. Then I like you said something about eating midlife predicts your future health.
Yeah.
So if, say for instance, I'm going to give you an example. Say I was eating unhealthy from maybe 10 years old to 40 years old. There
Yeah.
is there is hope for me. When I changed my diet at age 40, I start to eat healthier. I will be much healthier in my senior.
That's right.
Yes, so that was really good. And
Yeah.
bacteria in the blood. Oh, you said 100 million bacteria
Yeah, in
in
our gut.
in
Yeah.
our gut. Okay, I said,
Mhm.
wow, I thought that was hilarious. Oh my God, 100 million. Wow.
I know.
Parkinson's disease. I have to ask a question.
Yeah.
Is there hope for someone who is just realized that they are at the beginning of Parkinson's disease? If they change their eating habits, it's going to slow it down?
So with the evidence on diet and Parkinson's
Hmm.
disease, there have been some studies that show people who eat more antioxidant rich diets, so things
Hmm.
like berries and tea and things like that, that they might have a slower progression of their disease. One of the things that has been shown to slow the progression of the disease is exercise. So, if somebody's newly diagnosed with Parkinson's, I really think it's very important for them to move
Hmm.
their bodies and eat well and keep themselves as healthy as they can in other ways, because down the road, that may help them so that they can have new treatments for Parkinson's disease that are always being researched. So, yes, the diet can make a difference and exercise can as well.
Great. Then I love the diagram with the Mediterranean diet, and I love the one to the with all the different folks eating. I really like your take on how we are social well-being, and it's great that if you could eat with a lot of families, if you have it, eat with someone on Zoom. If it's just you and someone else, you have fun eating together, which is great, and it encourages you to also enjoy what you're eating. So I thought
Yeah.
that was really great, and I love that diagram. It's so colorful.
Yeah.
I just want to have some vegetables right now.
And
And you also talk about some people in different cultures may think they do not have the vegetables and fruits, but they do have it. Each culture, all cultures have fruits and vegetables, and some people try to make excuses and say, well, where I live, I do not have it. But you do have it in a supermarket. So there's
yeah.
no excuse for that. So that was great. I want to touch on, I know you said you're going to leave this item alone, but the alcohol. I look at the Mediterranean diet chart. It said 5 ounces of alcohol in your glass. Is that correct, Dr. Prasad? 5 ounces. But people, you were laughing. I know why you're laughing. People do not put 5 ounces.
Oh
They,
no.
they put more. I'm always looking at, especially at the TV show, they are always filling it to the brim.
Yeah.
So that 5 ounces is out the window, but that alcohol topic is a whole different topic by itself.
Yes.
Question.
Yes.
I know a lot of people when they go to the doctor, they have a lot of complication and they ask about drinking, and the doctor said, yes, you could drink a little bit, which
Yeah.
I am totally against that. But
Okay.
that's, as I said to you before, that's another story.
Yeah.
You mentioned one vegetable, pak chow. That's one of my favorite vegetables, pak chow. It
Oh,
is. I love it.
awesome.
I cook it with cauliflower, the
Oh,
white cauliflower. I cut up
uh-huh.
the carrots, onions, and garlic. It's great.
That sounds delicious.
Mhm. And what I do, you could also, I make something, I put spinach, and my husband eats white rice, so I sauteed the spinach with the
Uh-huh.
white rice. Now I'm going to try the pak chow with the
Um,
white rice for him.
there you go.
So, okay, the other topic, ultra processed food. You
Mhm.
talk about the chips and all those snacks. I am getting so conscious now. I was reading when I go into supermarket and
Uh,
reading all the labels. It's horrible.
yeah,
It's really horrible.
it is. And that's how you know that you're having an ultra processed food when you
Mhm,
have to read it and you're like, what is that even? I don't even know what
mhm.
that is.
Right. So therefore, my husband and I don't keep any snacks in the house. We
Yes,
don't. If he
that's the way
feel
to do
like
it.
having, right, if he feel like having a little snack, he'll go out and buy it, the little package, eat it.
Yeah,
That's it. Hmm.
right. Right. That's a
What
good way to do
what
it.
you don't say, you're not gonna want it. So
That's
that's
right.
our mother. So what my husband has been doing, you talk about all the salty treats is how it has out there. So some people, I tell them, instead of buying the salted nuts, buy
Mhm.
the raw nuts. My husband does that. He buys the raw nuts.
Oh yeah, those are good.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. And then the seasoning, I see people using a lot of these seasoning in
Mhm.
containers and they put in so much seasoning, but it's all full of salt
Oh, yeah.
and chemicals.
Yep, yep, you're right. Then that's a really good
Hmm.
point. Sometimes we don't think about that. That, if you buy
Hmm.
a container of lemon pepper, let's say, and if you actually you think, oh, I'm just getting
Hmm.
lemon flavored pepper, but actually, if you look at it,
Hmm.
sugar, there's salt, there's
Hmm.
preservatives, there's all these other things in there, and that is an easy place to kind of
Right.
switch things. Yeah,
Right. All these seasoning is it's so dangerous.
yeah.
This was very enlightening. It was fun. Thank you, Dr. Prasan. I have a little treat here. I'm gonna let me open up for you and for our audience to
Okay.
wrap it up. Oh, okay, my phone is acting up. It's coming. Okay, here we go. Let's see. I did a little, I love reading poems.
Oh
That's
yeah.
yeah. So I came across
Hmm.
this and all right. The thoughtful path. A vessel vast, deeper than the sea. I'm talking about our brain.
Uh-huh.
Holding memories is silent decree. Feed it knowledge, feed it healthy food.
Uh-huh.
Let it run beneath the moon, beneath the sun. Rest the weary, calm the rage. Keep it healthy, page by page. A gentle care, a mindful stride with strength and focus as a guide. Keep that brain healthy by eating healthy. Take one little step at a time, as Dr. Prasan mentioned in her presentation. Thank you very much. This was great. I
Love
appreciate you
that.
and
Thank
have
you.
a great evening with your families.
You too. You too.
Thank you.
Care.
Okay, take care. Bye
Bye.
bye.